Welcome everyone to Daf Yomi, 1 week at a time, Masechet Ketubot. Today we are going to be reviewing, this is our third lesson, and we're going to be reviewing Daf 14 through 20. We were in the middle of discussing when there are cases of people who are unsure, safek, we're not sure of maybe their lineage, of who they are. And the Gemara on Daf 14 tell us that if there's an engaged couple and she says that she's pregnant and that he's the father and he admits to it. So we do believe them, and therefore the child is kasher, meaning the child is seen as valid, and we are not concerned that maybe the child's parent is from someone who would be invalid, like a mamzer. Okay. The Gemara continues on Daf 14, discussing a woman who's called an almana isa, which means a widow we're unsure. And basically, Rabbi Yoshua explains that a widow whose late husband was from questionable lineage of priests, meaning we're not sure if they were really priests, she can still marry a kohen, a priest, because this is only out of safek, meaning there's a doubt here. And we say that this is different because the doubt is after they're already married, meaning they were already married and then he died. We assume that when she got married, she would have checked out his lineage, and therefore we assume that he comes from a proper lineage as opposed to a questionable lineage. Rabban Gamliel does not believe her, right? Again, Rabbi Yoshua does believe her, whereas Rabban Gamliel does not believe her. Again, we're not sure what her husband's background is, and therefore we're left with a doubt. The Gemara tells us that if someone tells somebody else that they are invalid because of, let's say, parentage, and they don't say anything, meaning they do not disagree, they're quiet. So the Gemara says that they are seen as invalid because they didn't protest. If they do protest, then we say that we do say that if they protest, then the person is valid. Right? Again, we said that if one does not protest, it seems to be that one is agreeing with that questionable lineage. We now have a Mishnah, where on the bottom of Daf 14, of a girl, there's a story of a girl who was raped when she went down to the well. And now the question is, who was the perpetrator? If most of the city that she lives in can marry Kohanim, meaning if most of the city have men who are, or people who are proper Jews in the sense that they're not illegitimate or invalid, then she can marry a Kohen, right? We don't have to be concerned for the minority. And here the Gemara is teaching us the concept of rov, right? Rov means majority. And we're going to see how that comes into play. So the Gemara explains that this story actually took place during the market season in Tzipori. Tzipori is a famous Talmudic city in the north, in the Galilee, in the Galil of Israel. And the Gemara explains that there are actually two majorities at play here. One is majority of the people in the city are kosher in the sense that they are valid, proper lineage. And the second majority is that the majority of people visiting the city are also kasher. They're also valid. So the Gemara suggests maybe she's seen as okay to marry a Kohen because we have a double majority, meaning one for the people who live in the city, two for the people that are visiting the city. And here, the Gemara teaches there's a very famous case in the Gemara when we're dealing with majorities. And there are two rules when we're dealing with majority. And as I mentioned previously, this Masachet is going to have a lot of very famous Talmudic concepts. So this concept of majority is very famous, and there are two separate ways to understand majority. When something separates from the majority or separates from a whole, we can assume that it is part of the majority. However, if you find something lying around on the street, and we'll get to the case in a minute, a very famous case which we have done before. But if you find something on the floor, it's as if it's 50-50 chance whether it is from the majority or from the minority. Now, this doesn't really work with probability. Rather, there are these rules. So the Gemara says, well, people in the city, those are set. That should be 50-50. Whereas people who are visiting, those are moving. And then the question is, are there two majorities here or only one? And the Gemara does say that in the end, again, she goes to someone in the city, that would be, if she goes to somebody in the city, then that would be 50-50, and then she would be invalid. But here, where she went to the well in the city, we see two majorities, and therefore she is valid. And here the Gemara on Daf 15 quotes the very famous case of what's called the 9 stores, right? There's a city with 10 butchers. 9 of them are kosher, and 1 of them is not kosher. So the Gemara tells us that if you bought meat in one of the stores, and then you go out and you don't remember, oh no, I don't remember which store I went to, because you went into the store, the Gemara says it's a 50-50 chance, which is not really the probability, but according to Jewish law, that's the probability, 50-50 chance, and therefore you cannot eat this meat. However, if you found the meat on the floor, right in the middle of the street, that meat has a 9 out of 10 chance of coming from a kosher store, right? It is separated from the store. Therefore, we follow the majority, and therefore we deem the meat as kosher. And the Gemara tells us that was only one majority, and that worked. How come in our case we needed two majorities? The Gemara says because with lineage we want to be very careful, and therefore we don't want to create any children who would be a mamzer. And therefore we want to make sure that there are two majorities and not just one. Okay, the Gemara comes up with other cases. We had the 9 stores. What about 9 frogs and 1 sheretz? If you remember, we learned the concept of a sheretz. Sheretz is a specific category of creepy, crawly animals, and that the Torah tells us that these 8 animals are tameh. All other creepy crawlies are not tameh in the same way. So the Gemara says, right, what if you touch this pile of, again, it was 9 frogs that are pure, as opposed to 1 sheretz, which is not pure. Again, a sheretz could be a weasel. There are all these different animals that are mentioned in the Torah. Well, what if you touched this pile So again, if you touch the pile, they're all sitting there together. That's seen as stationary, and therefore we say it's 50-50 chance, and therefore you would be impure. What if we had 9 impure animals, right? 9 shratzim and 1 pure frog. Um, if it's in the private domain, so then when we're unsure, we're going to say that you are impure. If it is in the public domain, when we're unsure, we say that you would be pure. So therefore, we are going to, it depends where this happened. What about, again, we're still working with the concept of majority. What if you throw a stone into, don't do this, but if you throw a stone into a group of people and you killed the Jew by accident, and then the Gemara asks, well, how many people were there, right? What's the group made of? So if the majority of the people were non-Jews, or even if it's not the majority, then then it seems that okay, so that's question one, and it seems that you killed this Jew by accident. What would happen? The Gemara brings up another case. What if you found an abandoned child in a city? How do we view this child? Is the child Jewish or non-Jewish? So the Gemara says you go according to the majority of the people in the city, whether they're Jews or non-Jews. That's the majority is whatever the child will be whatever the majority is in the town. If it's 50-50, we say that the child is seen as Jewish. So now the Gemara says, well, what does that mean? What does that mean that the child is Jewish? Not for lineage, meaning we don't assume that the child is lineage, but we say that it's for how we raise him. Do we raise the child Jewish or not Jewish? But if it's during the time of a caravan when a lot of Jews would be coming, now we have again 2 majorities, and that gives us a stronger case for the child. Shmuel says we actually need to know if the child is Jewish, so we know if we can clear rubble to save him on Shabbat. Let's say a building. Don't get nervous. I'm gonna amend the statement. But first, Shmuel says we want to know if he's Jewish or not, basically to know if we can save him on Shabbat. But then the Gemara says, wait a minute. If it's pikuach nefesh, remember the term pikuach nefesh, which means to save a life. If it's to save a life, we don't go according to majority. Even if it's a minority, we save people no matter what. Right? If it's possible that he's Jewish, we save his life. Again, we're talking about breaking Shabbat in order to save his life. And the Gemara says either way, you can save his life. So the Gemara amends it and says, why is it important to know if he's Jewish? We want to know if we can feed him kosher food or not kosher food, right? We're raising this child. Is the child Jewish or not? Okay. And from here, the Gemara talks about also, we want to know if this child is Jewish. So we know that for damages, we know that there is a different amount that you pay if someone damages Jewish property or non-Jewish property. And the Gemara says we need to know if this person is Jewish in order to pay back the damages that he is owed. And with that, we finish our first chapter in Masechet Ketubot. And now we're going to start the second chapter. So the Mishnah tells us on Daf 15 that women who are widowed or divorced, if she says that she was a virgin at her wedding, she wants to get 200. She wants to get 200 zuz, right? So again, she was widowed or divorced, and then she remarries, and she says, "I was a bitula. Sorry. Again, she was widowed or divorced, and now she's getting her ktuva money, and she says, I was a virgin when I got married, I get 200. And he says, no, you weren't. You were not a virgin when you got married. You only get 100, right? So it's he said, she said. So the Mishnah tells us that if there are witnesses that say that she had a hinuma, hinuma I'll explain as veil, though the Gemara is going to have different explanations. But basically, if she had a veil at her wedding, this seems to be proof that she was a virgin when she got married, and therefore she's believed, and she gets 200 zuz when they get divorced. Um, or maybe the Mishnah gives another option. If they gave out roasted grain at her wedding, that's another sign that she was a betula when she got married. It just seems just very interesting, I guess, sociologically, how the wedding definitely reflected who was getting married. I don't think that that would be the case nowadays. Maybe a comparable case, not in terms of the woman being a virgin or not, but maybe one could say, oh, if the dress, sometimes people in their second marriage will wear a different type of dress. So maybe one could say, oh, I remember her dress looked like this. It must have been a second marriage. So something like that, meaning something you can point to at the wedding that would signal if this was the first marriage or a second marriage. Here we're talking about if she was a betula or not, right? If she was a virgin or not. The Mishnah finishes by telling us that a person is believed to say, I bought this field from your father, and I bought this field from your father. The person is believed. And here we have another concept. The concept in Hebrew is hapeh she'asar hu hapeh shehitir. That means the mouth that I guess the mouth that incriminated the person is the same mouth that said something. What's the positive side, right? Said something to validate the person. Meaning, if I didn't need to say anything, and then I say, right, I was actually married beforehand, but the person died before we could have relations, and really I'm a virgin. That is seen as a believable statement because I didn't have to say anything. I could have just said, I'm a virgin. But instead, because I kind of incriminated myself and in the same sentence validated something, that person is believed. And we're going to learn that that's a very unique case, meaning if you are not adding any new information, meaning if you're not incriminating yourself, then you don't necessarily, you aren't necessarily believed. So we'll see cases as we continue tonight. So again, as I mentioned, if the person says, right, this field was your father's, but I bought it from him, right, he's believed. But if there are witnesses to say that the field, right, other witnesses to say that the field was your father's, so then the person is not believed because he's not incriminating himself in the initial statement. Okay, the Gemara on the top of Daf 16 tells us, again, she says she was a virgin when she got married. He says that she wasn't. Right? She is sure, and he also seems to be sure. Here in the Gemara it says, right, the concept is sure is bari. Bari means sure in Aramaic, for sure, as opposed to shema, not sure. Right? When he's sure and she's sure, so it seems the Gemara says that we do not believe her. The Mishnah says that Rabbi Yoshua agrees, and the Gemara tries to figure out what case does Rabbi Yoshua agree to. Right, when if you remember, last week we had the case of her being accused. Remember, they were engaged and then they got married, and he says she wasn't a virgin when they got married. And then remember, she said, "Oh, I was raped," and she says, "I was raped while we were engaged," and he says, "No, you were raped before." Remember, there was that case of who's believed. So the Gemara says that when he accuses her of being raped and she says yes, so then he agrees that we believe her. But again, remember, she says yes, but it happened while we were engaged. Remember, we learned the concept of migo, right? Migo means, right, where she could have said X, that would have gotten her out of this situation, but she says Y, meaning if there was a better lie and she doesn't use it, then we believe her, right? That's called migo. We believe her when there's a migo, right? She didn't have to say she was raped. She could have said, no, 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 I was a virgin, right? But she didn't say that. Therefore, we believe her. Um, Okay. However, that was remember if that you remember that was Rabban Gamliel. Rabbi Yoshua says he doesn't even believe her, even when there is a migo. But in the field case, the case I just mentioned, Rabbi Yoshua does believe him, and here because of the migo, meaning he didn't have to say anything, but the fact that he says something, we believe him. But with the bride, she does need to explain herself again, because there is a claim that she wasn't a virgin. Therefore, Rabbi Yoshua doesn't believe her. With the case of the field, because he didn't have to say anything, Rabbi Yoshua does believe him in this case. Okay. All right. Now, back to this concept of majority, right? Again, she's saying I was a virgin. So now the Gemara says, well, the truth is, majority of girls who get married are betulot at their wedding. A minority are widows. So maybe we should go according to the majority and believe her. Or, right, maybe, right, they speak about her, right, when she got married. And when they talk about her, right, there's this call, right, a voice. There are people talking about her. And if they didn't talk about her, that she was a bitula at her wedding, then maybe she wasn't a bitula. And again, the Gemara says, if there are witnesses, we are going to believe those witnesses. We are concerned, however, that maybe she's going to two separate courts to collect her ktuva, right? Maybe she's trying to trick the court, right? She says, "Oh, I lost my ktuva. Give me 200 200 zuz." And then and then she really does have her ktuva, and she goes to another court, in the other town, and then she says, "Oh, here's my ktuva. Give me my money." So the Gemara says that if you're going to collect your ktuva, you have to do it in the town that they wrote the receipt to the man, right? Meaning we want to make sure that she doesn't try to collect twice. And therefore, if there's a receipt, you need to go to the same town in order to collect for the ktuva. What if the ktuva was lost or hidden? So then the only time that you pay it is if there are witnesses that it was lost. Right? Maybe she's going to bring two separate sets of witnesses, one to this court and one to that court. And therefore, the Gemara says you have to write a receipt if you pay someone's ktuva, and that receipt needs to be, in the town records. Okay. The Gemara says there's another sign to show that she was a bitula when she got married. If the cup of announcement was passed before her. The question is, what is this cup of announcement? It seems that it was filled with wine that was truma, again, very special wine. And the Gemara says, well, maybe she was married to a Kohen, and that's why they carried around a truma wine. And that proves that she was a betula. Or maybe the truma is from the first fruit, right? And that's meant to symbolize her first relations, right? It's the sign that she was a betula when she got married. Or maybe they passed a closed barrel of wine in front of her. This shows, right, closed, that she's a betula. If they pass around an open barrel, it means that she has already had relations. Again, seems to be very public knowledge. That would definitely, not happen nowadays. And here, at the bottom of Daf 16 and the beginning of Daf 17 is a very famous line in Hebrew, Ketza mirakdim lifnei hakala, right? If you're familiar with the song, how do we dance before the bride? And the Gemara asks, right, what do we say to the bride at the wedding? Beit Shammai, in his very black and white sort of way, Beit Shammai say, Kmot shehi, the way she is, right? You find some good quality about her, right? Oh, she has such white teeth. Oh, you have such beautiful hair. She has such beautiful midot, as they say, right? You do not exaggerate. Say Beit Shammai. Beit Hillel say no. Again, very famously, we sing Kala Na'eh V'Chasuda. Right, that's the end of the song. The Kala is beautiful and righteous, meaning I don't care if she's not beautiful, you tell her she is beautiful. The whole point is we want to endear her to her husband, and I don't care if she's not beautiful to you, you say she looks beautiful. Right? So Beit Shammai says to Beit Hillel, what if she's lame or what if she's blind? You're going to tell her that she's so beautiful? The Beit Shammai says you need to tell the truth. You can't lie. The Gemara, Beit Hillel say, no, you need to praise her no matter what. This is her wedding day, and you say the nicest things that you can come up with. Right? They say, right, always talk nicely to people. We need to be sensitive to people, and therefore say the nicest things that you can say. And from here, the Gemara talks about when rabbis gave smicha to their students, right? Smicha is when they ordained their students to make them rabbis. They said certain very beautiful praises in front of them. Again, the idea of when you're at this momentous occasion, you should praise the person. And from here, since we're talking about the wedding, not only do you need to say nice things, but you're supposed to entertain the bride. And the Gemara goes through all of these stories of different sages that used to dance in front of the bride. Again, it's interesting, right? We're in a society where generally there's a separation between men and women, but here the sages are actually dancing in front of the bride. And this is, if you've been to right, Jewish weddings, there's a custom that they usually bring the bride over to the men's section, and she sits with the groom, and everybody performs for the bride and the groom. Right? They talk about dancing with hadassim, with myrtle branches, again, saying the words kala na'eh v'chasuda, or they juggled, right? And the students said to the teacher, "How can you be juggling? You're a rabbi." And the Gemara and the rabbi says, "What do you mean? This is a mitzvah. You're supposed to rejoice with the bride and the groom." There was even a sage who used to put the bride on his shoulders, and so much so to endear the bride to the groom. The Gemara says that you can look at the bride all 7 days of rejoicing. Again, remember, there's supposed to be a separation. You're not supposed to look at the women, but for the 7 days you can, again, to make the chatan love her more. The Gemara says we don't follow this opinion. No looking at the bride for 7 days. Okay. And what's, we were talking about the importance of the wedding. So you can even divert a funeral for the kala, right? If the bride is coming out of her house and she's going to her wedding, you can divert the funeral so that she doesn't get stuck, on the road. But both of them are diverted if a king comes by. It seems that Agrippas, the king, diverted his kind of retinue for a bride, and the Gemara says that was not good. A king is not allowed to relinquish his honor, and that was not the best thing to do. Since we're talking about the importance of weddings and funerals, the Gemara tells us that you should stop learning Torah or take a break from learning Torah in order to go to a funeral or a wedding, right? If they need people to rejoice or to mourn the person, you stop learning in order to go to the funeral or the wedding. The Gemara asks, how many, what does it mean that they need you? So if there are less than 12,000 people at the funeral, then they need you. Or maybe if it's less than 600,000 people. But it seems that if it's for a great rabbi, then it doesn't matter how many thousands of people are coming, everyone should go. And we have seen this definitely recently when, unfortunately, very great rabbis have passed away. And really, you see, tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people coming out in order to pay their last respects. As I mentioned, the word hinuma means veil. Actually, in modern Hebrew, hinuma is a veil. So we said that that was the sign that she was a betula when she got married, or maybe it's a canopy of myrtle, and that is also a sign that she was a betula. It seems that in Bavel, they used to rub oil on the heads of the rabbis in order to show that she was a betula. Again, interesting custom. If the woman was a widow, so it seems that they did not give out this toasted grain at the wedding. So if they did, we know that she was a betula. Okay, we did the concept of majority. Now we're going to talk about the concept of Hazaka or Hazaka. Hazaka means that there is I guess, a propensity to say something. We'll see what that means, right? So let's say somebody used a field for 3 years and nobody said anything, meaning no one contested it. So then that person has a chazaka. They have a valid reason, or I don't want to say excuse, but they have validity to say that this land is their land, even if they don't have the document of sale. Because they were there for 3 years, they are believed. What happens if a person used the field for 2 years while the father was alive, and then for 1 year after the father died, and the son who inherited it was a minor, right? So we need 3. In general, chazaka is 3. 3 years, 3 days, 3 times. It depends on the case. Here we need 3 years. One, if there was 2 years and then 1 year. So the Gemara says that that's not seen as a chazaka. If you remember, the case in the Mishnah was, I bought this field from your father. So the Gemara asks, why is that the case? Why couldn't it just have been about his own field, not his father's field? Right? He could have taught that, I used your field for 2 years when you were around, and then 1 year when you weren't around. So the Gemara says, no, that's not a chazaka. Again, 2 and 1 is not 3, even though 2 plus 1 is 3. But here, 2 and 1 does not equal 3. And here, the Gemara talks about 3 regions in Israel. There is Yehuda, right, the south. There's the north, the Galil, and the Transjordan, right, the other side of the Jordan. Those are 3 separate areas. So the Gemara explains that if the owner of the field and the occupier of the field were in the same region, then you can create a chazaka, right, if they were in the same area. But if they were not in the same area, it seems that that would not be okay, because maybe he didn't even know. So that seems to prove that you can't protest if you live in another region, right, or not in front of the person. So the Gemara says, no, that's not the case. You can protest if you're not in the same area. Therefore, this is not an excuse if you were in another place. However, let's say travel was restricted between 2 areas, then you would not have a chazaka to have said that you were on this land if he couldn't come and protest because he was in a different region. Daf 18 tells us that the Gemara is trying to find other cases that the Mishnah could have quoted, where one person says to another that he bought or he borrowed something, and, right, again, right, something to incriminate him and then to validate, right? So he bought or borrowed something and he already paid it back, right? So is that person believed? And we're trying to find cases where he's believed in that case, right? So if he says, I borrowed money from your father, but I paid back half. Here we have another concept. The concept is if you admit to half of the claim, this is called modeh b'miktzat. You're modeh, you admit to miktzat, to some, right? So if you say you owe me money, and then I say, oh, I already paid you back all of it, that's, I deny the whole thing. But if I say I paid you back half, I'm admitting that I borrowed the money. I'm just saying that I paid half. And therefore, the Gemara says that if someone admits to half, then they need to take an oath that they did pay back half. Or maybe no, right? If I didn't need to admit anything and I do, so that's hapesha asar, what we mentioned before. I didn't need to say anything, so then maybe I am believed. So the Gemara says that, again, if someone comes and testifies that the other person borrowed money, right, or that a minor comes and testified that he borrowed money, then he would need to swear. Otherwise, he does not need to swear. Right? Again, we say that a person won't be brazen in front of the lender, right? If I know that I borrowed the money, I'm not going to say, no, what are you talking about? I never borrowed anything. What will I say? Oh, yeah, I did borrow, but I paid back half, right? Meaning, I'm not going to say no. I'll say that I paid back half, even though I didn't. And therefore, right, I need to take a vow, meaning I have to show that I'm really telling the truth, because maybe you're really lying, right? Maybe you're just trying to stall so that you can get like an extension and then pay everything back eventually. Okay, the next Mishnah on Daf 18 tells us, right, that witnesses come and say that they signed a document, but they were forced, right, or they were minors, or they were invalid, meaning I say it's my signature, but I'm invalidating the document because I'm saying I wasn't a good witness in the first place. If other witnesses validate their signatures, right? Meaning, again, if we have validation from another source, right, or the signatures are authenticated from another source, then the original witnesses are not believed, right? However, if they say, I'm authenticating my signature, but I was X, Y, and Z, then they are believed. Okay, the Gemara says another important concept in Hebrew, Ein Adam Mesim Atzmo Rasha, right? A person is not believed to make himself a Rasha, right? Evil or transgressing, right? We don't believe that person to say that he transgressed, right? And therefore, right, if the person says, I was bribed to sign this document, we don't believe them, right? Because we don't want to believe that they were bribed or that they would take the bribe. But if they were in mortal danger, then we believe them, meaning it was against their will. Also, another important concept is that once witnesses testify, they can't come and change their testimony or add to their testimony, right? Once they give their entire testimony, that's it. So Rabbi Meir says that you can't say that we signed and we were forced, because that's amending their original testimony. The sages, however, say that you can say it, meaning it's all seen as one testimony. Okay, Daf 19 tells us that, right, again, remember we said if you're forced, we believe you. Rav Chisda says, wait, what do you mean? You should die instead of signing falsely, meaning it's so, it's a very serious thing to sign a document that's false, right? I can't sign a document that says he lent money to him if I didn't see it, right? He says you should rather die than to do that. The Gemara says, wait a minute, no, right? The sages say you don't have to give up your life for this, right? There are only three, again, very famous, there are only three capital offenses that you need to give up your life for, and that is idol worship, forbidden sexual relations, or murder, right? If someone says, I'm going to kill you if you don't kill Reuven, you need to let yourself get killed. You are not allowed to kill Reuven. But if they say, sign on this document that I was here, the sages say, go ahead and sign, right? Save your life. You don't have to give up your life for that. Okay. Rabbi Meir holds that once someone admits that he wrote a document, you don't need to authenticate it, and therefore you don't invalidate it. Meaning, once I bring this signed document, according to Rabbi Meir, that's enough. There's another type of document that the Gemara mentions here, which is called a shtar amana. And this seems to be like almost like a IOU in good faith. What does that mean? You ask someone to write and like, I lent you money or I owe you money, but he never lent him the money, right? The point was like, oh, next week when I want to borrow the money, so I'll already have this document. So that's problematic because what do we do with it, right? Right, you do it to save time, but a person isn't believed to say, oh, I have this document that I owe him money. Oh, no, but it was this trust document. It wasn't real. I don't really owe him money. I never took it in the end. We don't trust somebody to say that. Okay. The Gemara teaches us, again, since we're talking about borrowing and lending money, if Reuven owes Shimon money and Shimon owes Levi money, then Reuven is allowed to pay Levi directly, right? That being said, if it's all the same amount. Again, Rav Kahana now says that you cannot have one of these shtar amana in your house, again, because we said it's very dangerous. We don't know what's real and what's not real. Again, right, therefore, witnesses aren't believed to say that they signed this shtar amana, again, because we said a person cannot make himself, right, into a rasha, right? We say he's not going to, what's the word? He's not going to, I can't think of the word, right? Make himself.
Incriminate.
Yes, thank you. I don't know. I'm like, not discriminate. Yes, incriminate, right? A person is not believed to incriminate themselves. Thank you very much. And therefore, we do not accept this testimony. Also, the Gemara tells us you're not allowed to keep a document like an IOU that was already paid, right? Again, we're concerned that you're going to take it out another time and say, oh, look, you still owe me money. So you're not allowed to keep that in your house. Okay. Again, as we said, the witnesses aren't believed to say that they signed the document if they were coerced. They can say, right, what if the witnesses say that when we signed the document, there was a condition, right? I will pay you back money, or I'll lend you money if you mow my lawn 3 times this month. The witnesses are believed to say that the condition wasn't fulfilled, and therefore, the contract is invalid. What if both witnesses say that this is a valid again, a valid contract, but one says that there was a condition and the other one doesn't say that there was a condition. So it seems that, again, it's two versus one, because, again, two are saying that it was a valid contract, but one of the two is also saying that there was a condition, and therefore they are not believed, right? It's two against one, even though it's the same one. Okay. All right. Next. Right. Two people signed a document. Okay. So now here's the case. Two people signed a document and then they died. So two other people come to validate their signatures. But they not only do they validate the signatures, they say that these people were actually minors or they were forced, meaning it's not a valid document. They are believed, again, because they're pesha asar. They're validating the signatures, but also invalidating the document. But if the signatures were validated from somewhere else, then the other witnesses are not believed, and therefore we say that this document is a valid document. From here, the Gemara talks about discrediting witnesses. There are two ways to discredit witnesses, right? So just to remind us, first of all, we're in Masechet Ketubot. We started talking about marriage. We went on to talk about contract law, and now we're talking about testimony. So there, again, generally testimony is we need two valid witnesses. There are two ways to invalidate the testimony. One is called hakhasha, and that means to contradict the testimony, right? I saw the person holding a gun, and the person was wearing a red shirt. And somebody else comes and says, "What are you talking about? I saw the same case, and the person was wearing a blue shirt." Right? We contradict them, right? It happened at a different time, at a different place, a different person. That's called contradicting them. But there's another way, which is called hazama. And that is, right, a whole other concept, which is edim zomimim. We're going to talk about that another time. But what does that mean? Instead of contradicting the witness's testimony, we say, "Wait a minute, Bob and Joe, how could you say that you were in New York at the time of this murder? You were with us in Florida. We were on vacation. There's no way you could have seen this murder take place in New York." That is called hazama. And basically, the witnesses who were now disproven, it seems that they were, trying to get at this guy. They were trying to, whatever punishment he would have got, they actually now get. And it's very serious. But here, the Gemara on Daf 20 tells us that in order to do hazama, you need to do it in front of the witnesses, meaning I have to go in front of whatever I said his name was, Joe and Bob, and I need to go to court. They need to be there, and I need to say, "What are you talking about? We were in Florida. We had the best time." They have to be there. But remember, our case was these two witnesses who signed the document, they died. So now, right, if the first Edim died, how can we contradict them? Maybe in order to contradict witnesses, they also have to do it in front of the witnesses, and now they died, so you can't contradict them. So the Gemara says basically, no. For Hazama, we need you to say it in front of the people, but for Hakhasha, meaning to contradict them, blue shirt, red shirt, 12 o'clock at night, 12 o'clock during the day, you don't have to do it in front of the witnesses, and therefore our case with the witnesses who died, you could discredit them because they don't have to be there in order for you to discredit them. The case that we brought said that you can only challenge a document that was validated. You can only validate signatures with a document that was challenged in court and then it was authenticated. So the Gemara says, why is that the case? Because it seems that in order to, again, authenticate signatures, it needed to be validated in a court. And the only way that would happen is if that document was challenged. Or, says the Gemara, you can bring two other documents from another person, meaning two Ketubot where these people signed, or two bills, contracts that show that you bought a piece of land, and we have signatures on these two separate documents, then we can use those as ways to authenticate the signature on this document that we have in front of us. Again, we're concerned for forgery, and therefore you need two separate documents. And since we're talking about testimony, the Gemara tells us in general, a testimony has to be verbal, right? Mipi ha'ed, from the mouth of a witness. And therefore, the witness has to come to court and say his testimony. But the Gemara tells us that a person can use a paper that, right, he took notes on to kind of jog his memory, right? So I actually taught this morning in my group, and we all agreed that our memory is not what it used to be, right? So if I see somebody lending money to another person, I can come home and write, in my Google Calendar, oh, today so-and-so lent so-and-so money, and I can use that to remind myself. But, says the Gemara, I have to have remembered that something happened. Like, I remember, last summer, someone lent something somewhere. Let me look at my Google Calendar. If that's the case, then it works. But if I totally don't remember anything, so then I can't use that paper to remind me. The Gemara asks, what if the lender or the borrower reminds you, right? Remember when I paid back? Remember you saw, right? Are you allowed to do that? So that's a machloket, if that's okay, if the borrower can remind the witness or not. Okay, and since we're talking about memory, so the Gemara says, like, how long do we assume people are going to remember things? For me, it would be less than one day, but the Gemara says much longer than that. So the Gemara talks about wanting to know where people are buried. Basically, again, cemeteries, we know if you go into a cemetery, there is impurity, right, from the dead bodies. However, what if there's like a mound right outside of a town or a path? Should we assume that maybe somebody buried someone in that mound? So the Gemara tells us that these mounds of dirt near a city or a path, if they're old or new, but they're close to the city or the path, we have to assume that they are impure, that there's someone buried there. But if they're far away and they're new, so then we should assume that they are pure, because we would have heard if there was a funeral or if somebody died. But if they're old, then we should assume that they're impure, because who's going to remember? So the Gemara asks, first of all, right, what does it mean old? Old is 60 years, right? If it's older than 60 years, then we assume people forgot. And the truth is that we'll learn in the Gemara every once in a while when they want to hear about either a custom or the law in a certain city. Sometimes the Gemara says, Hahu Saba, right? There was once this elderly man, right? And he remembered all the old traditions. So we do have this concept of someone keeping the traditions alive. It seems that that's for 60 years, but the Gemara says maybe even longer. And the question is really what's going on here in this case? And the Gemara explains, and I think it's very sensitive of the Gemara, that unfortunately, if a woman would have a miscarriage, if she gives birth in the middle of the night, she might go right outside of the town in order to bury the baby, and therefore, right, she wouldn't necessarily have a big funeral. She wouldn't necessarily go to a cemetery, but she might go close to the city and bury the child right outside. And therefore, we have to be concerned about this. Also, the Gemara mentions if someone has a disease where they would lose a limb, right? It mentions shchin, which is like boils, but I think it probably means something more like leprosy or diabetes, where you might lose some limbs. Those limbs also might be buried close to the city. And again, we learn from here that people seem to only remember testimony up to 60 years. And the Gemara says, no, if you're involved in a case, where you need to remember something, maybe you'll even remember it for longer. And with that, we finish our review for today, and wishing all of you a wonderful week. And we will continue Bezrat Hashem next week.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Have a great week.
Thank you. You too.